They say a single drop of water can't kill you. They're wrong. It won't stop your heart. It won't break your bones. It does something much, much worse. It takes you apart, piece by piece, from the inside out. This is the story of how that one simple drop of water was turned into a weapon of psychological warfare, engineered to push its victims to the very edge of madness. When you hear the phrase Chinese water torture, you probably picture something from an old movie, a strange, ancient punishment from the Far East. But that entire image, that very name, is a lie. The truth is, this method isn't Chinese at all. Its origins are actually European. The first person to write it down was an Italian lawyer named Hippolytus de Marsilius back in the late 15th or early 16th century. Marsilius had a simple observation. He watched how a constant drip of water over years could carve a hole into solid stone, and a dark idea took root. What if you applied that same relentless principle not to stone, but to the human mind? So, where did the Chinese part come from? The name seems to have popped up in the late 19th century, likely as a bit of branding to make the method sound more foreign and sinister to Western ears. Its fame was then sealed in the early 20th century, not by a torturer, but by the great escape artist Harry Houdini. In 1910, Houdini unveiled his Chinese water torture cell. Now, his trick was different. He was suspended upside down in a locked tank of water. But the name was catchy, and it stuck. It forever linked this European idea to a culture that had nothing to do with its creation. But the name is the least scary part of this story. The real horror is in how it works. How can something as simple as water be so brutal? The secret is that it was never about physical pain. It's a cold, calculated assault on the mind. It happens in stages. It starts with being completely immobilized. A person is tied down, their head fixed in place. Above them, a container is set up to let a single drop of cold water fall on their forehead. At first, it's just annoying. A cold drip, a small shock, then it's over. Another drop. It's irritating but manageable. Your brain, being a pattern-seeking machine, immediately tries to figure out the rhythm. Drip, pause, drip. It tries to create order, to predict the sensation, to get it under control. But that's when the second stage begins. Unpredictability. The drops are deliberately randomized. A 3-second pause, then 5, then 2, then 1. The brain's search for a pattern fails over and over. This is the core of the torture. Anxiety starts to crawl in. You become hyper-focused, your entire world shrinking to that single spot on your forehead, waiting for a tiny shock you know is coming, but can never, ever predict. The physical feeling was never the point, and now it fades into the background. What's taking over is the third stage, sensory distortion. The victim is often left in darkness or silence, stripped of any other stimulation. That single drip becomes their entire reality. The sound of the water hitting their skin can become deafening. The feeling of it spreading across their scalp is all-consuming. This is when the mind, desperate for an escape it can't find, can begin to break. The final stage is a psychological collapse. People who have endured similar ordeals have reported hallucinations. The sound of the water can morph into voices. They might see things that aren't there. Paranoia takes hold. They lose all track of time. Has it been minutes or days? The line between real and imagined completely dissolves, pushed toward psychosis not by violence, but by the relentless, unpredictable torment of a single drop of water. This horrifyingly effective method wasn't just a theory. It has a twisted history, sometimes appearing in the last places you'd expect. In a grim mockery of medicine, some accounts suggest dripping water was used in certain French and German asylums in the 1800s. Based on a bogus theory that mental illness was caused by too much blood in the brain, doctors used the dripping machine as a supposed treatment. Instead of curing madness, they were likely inducing it. And while the slow drip torture is unique, using water as a weapon is a grim theme in human history. During the Philippine-American War, U.S. forces used the water cure, forcing water down a victim's throat to simulate drowning. Japanese forces used similar torture on Allied POWs in World War II. More recently, the world has debated waterboarding, where water is poured over a cloth on a person's face to create the sensation of drowning, famously used by the U.S. government after 9/11. Though the methods differ, the goal is the same: to use water, not for lasting physical injury, but for extreme psychological terror. These practices are universally condemned under international law, including the United Nations Convention Against Torture, as cruel and inhuman. The power of this torture is grounded in basic neuroscience. Our brains are hardwired to predict what's coming next. It's a survival instinct that makes us feel safe. The dripping water torture hacks this system. The total inability to predict the next drop creates a state of chronic, unending stress. And this isn't just a feeling. Constant stress floods the body with hormones that can physically damage parts of the brain, responsible for memory, attention, and emotional control. So, psychological torture doesn't just scare you, it literally undermines your ability to think clearly. The sensory part is just as important. When you're deprived of all other senses and forced to focus on one single, relentless stimulus, you create the perfect conditions for a break from reality. The brain, starved for information, can start creating its own, which leads to the hallucinations and paranoia victims report. The damage isn't temporary. Survivors of such ordeals often suffer from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, chronic anxiety, and memory loss. The collection of these symptoms is sometimes referred to as torture syndrome. The goal was never just to get information, it was to dismantle a person's identity and erase their will to resist. The terrifying part is that even if the body is left without a single scar, the mind can be wounded forever. We started with a drop of water, something so basic, so essential to life. But when it's turned against the very way our minds are built, it becomes a tool of terrifying power. The journey from a simple annoyance to a full psychological collapse shows just how fragile our sanity really is. It proves that the cruelest things we can do to each other don't break the body, but unravel the mind from within. You don't need a complex machine or brutal violence to destroy someone. Sometimes all it takes is time, a chair, and a single unpredictable drop. It leaves you with an unsettling question. Stripped of everything, your entire world reduced to one tiny sensation you can't control or escape. How long do you think you could last before the silence between the drops becomes louder than the drops themselves?